Bronies completely traumatized the generation. Here's how.
I used to wonder what friendship could be, until you walked in these magic with me. Take adventure and have fun, a beautiful heart, faithful and strong. Sharing kindness and easy feet, and magic makes it all complete. You have mine, so you know you are my very best friend.
You're probably familiar with what a Brony is. If you aren't, a Brony is basically a male fan of My Little Pony who is usually an adult or teenager. The story goes that on the website 4chan, people were watching the new My Little Pony show back in 2010 semi-ironically, but then ended up actually liking it and becoming sort of obsessed with it. Fans of the show would call each other Pony Bro, which was then turned into Bronies, and well, the rest is history. It seems odd that so many adult men would be so in love with a children's show. But the phenomenon was a very, very real thing. It came to the point where there were conventions, mainstream news attention, and just a lot of buzz around Bronies and My Little Pony. Now obviously, My Little Pony had a huge fan base of actual children being the target demographic. These being young Gen Z children, who probably had access to the internet. Now the thing about the Brony community is that it was definitely not the safest place for a kid to be. A lot of Bronies were totally sweet and just had a pure enjoyment for this innocent show. And that's great, there was nothing wrong with that. However, a lot of Bronies liked the show in ways that weren't appropriate, let's just say that. Which unfortunately led a lot of kids to be exposed to very, very disturbing things that they really should not be seeing. So join me today as I explain to you how Bronies traumatized a generation. To give some context, I was a Brony as a kid. My Brony origin story basically comes from one day that me and my brother were on the Hasbro website playing Flash games, probably relating to Nerf or Star Wars or something. My brother was just clicking around the website and found an episode of My Little Pony. A full one, and this was back in 2010, so the show had basically just come out. I assumed that they were putting episodes online for promotional reasons. Regardless, he clicked on it, and I was like, that's for little girls. Then, we watched the episode, and we both really liked it. I was like 6 or 7 years old at the time, so, you know, I enjoyed it. After this, we both sought out more pony content. We just happened to have gotten a TV with cable connection on that same day, which led us to find the Hub Network, which is where My Little Pony was being aired alongside some other shows. And then the rest was basically history. We watched more My Little Pony, and we both became big fans of it. And it stayed relatively contained, like most children watching a cartoon show would. We had some toys, we introduced some friends to it, but that was about it. Until my curiosity got the better of me. So, as a kid who was getting more and more internet access the older he got, I ended up researching some Brony stuff when I was about 8 years old. Now, I didn't know what a Brony was at the time. I didn't know any of the fandom, really. I just liked the cute pony show. But, after searching a bit online, I was introduced to this massive fandom filled with grown men. And at the time, I thought it was cool as hell. Now, cool isn't the first thing that most people think of when it comes to Bronies, but as a little kid, having so many grown adults be into something that you're also into makes it feel cool. It makes it feel like relevant and like a big kid sort of thing. So learning about Bronies, I thought they were awesome. I ended up calling myself a Brony and talking about it to my friends, and just finding more and more fan-made content. It was great and a lot of fun.
I'm awesome. I'm a Brony. So is Nick. Yes, so is Nick. I'm a Brony, 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 Brony. Brony style.
My favorite pony by far was Derpy Hooves, a character who was adored by the fandom, coming from just an animation era where her eyes were a little bit off. The fandom loved her so much that she was referenced in the show by name, which then led to its own controversy, which is a whole video on its own.
Now, careful, Derpy!
But there were tons of cool animations of the characters and Derpy and all this stuff. However, you know, I said there was a lot of adult men with intentions that weren't, you know, the most innocent when it came to this show. Well, unfortunately, it was really easy for a kid to stumble upon that sort of content. Something that was very popular at the time was creepypasta. Internet horror stories that were often not the best in terms of writing or story, but had captivated internet audiences for a while. Of course, My Little Pony being popular had its fair share of creepypastas. One of which being Cupcakes, a seemingly innocent title. But the story and animations alongside it were anything but innocent. There was a user on YouTube that went by Mr. Davy. He made My Little Pony parody animations, and they were strikingly similar to the show. Little is known about Mr. Davy, but something that he formerly worked at Hasbro, something that he's just like a career animator, or just a guy with a lot of free time and really good animation skills. Regardless, Mr. Davy created a few videos on My Little Pony that were disturbing, to say the very least, one of which being cupcakes. For context, one of the characters in the show, Pinkie Pie, runs a little cupcake bake shop. She's generally considered to be kind of a crazy character, and even had a mental breakdown in one episode, which led people to make a story where her cupcakes were actually made of other ponies. So there was an animation made off of the story, and it starts off innocent enough. There's a fun song, the ponies are dancing, until Rainbow Dash gets knocked out. Rainbow Dash wakes up in a dark room, strapped to an operating table, with her wings stabbed by hooks being pulled up. She sees the disembodied stuffed heads of characters that hadn't been on the show for a little while, and makes a grim realization. Pinkie Pie then pulls up a chainsaw, with a deranged smile on her face. Pinkie Pie then cuts Rainbow Dash's wings off, covers herself in blood, and it is gory. They really spared no detail when making this. However, throughout the song, whenever there's an instrumental riff, it just cuts to a cute animation of the two characters dancing, and then cuts right back to the horror. I'm obviously not going to show you, but eventually the character is cut open and her organs are pulled out in gruesome detail like the rest of the video. We then see the gory cupcakes that result of this entire operation. This video was very popular and was watched by so many children who didn't know any better, which honestly is very sad. It is a terrifying video. I watched it as a kid. I couldn't make it through the entire thing, but this is definitely one of those that kept me up at night. And I'm willing to bet, like, maybe hundreds of thousands of other children who were just fans of this cartoon. The way that it started off innocent and then turned into a disturbing mess, really just fun to watch. For anyone, really. Even rewatching it now as an adult, it's not even, like, funny. It's just gratuitous, really. Mr. Davy, the same animator, also made a video by the name of Smile.HD. This one is honestly kind of worse. Again, this video was incredibly well animated and starts off very cute and sweet. It's got a remix of the iconic Smile song from the show. We see Pinkie Pie running through a field alongside the main six having a picnic. She runs over, but instead of a wholesome little moment, she kicks one in the face and her head is ripped straight off. Again, with very gratuitous detail. We are shown all these little ponies' faces of pure fear and anguish right before they're about to be killed, or we see them watching each other and then are treated to relentless gore. Something I should mention is that the re-uploads of this video, both of them really, are not age restricted. No, they are fully just fine for everyone to watch, which honestly, I'm not one for age-restricting content. I think most content shouldn't be age-restricted, if it's not made for children. However, this is an exception to me. I think this absolutely should be age-restricted. Seemingly, YouTube doesn't care. It'd be really ironic if my video gets age-restricted because I'm talking about the topics, but I guess we'll just see. Throughout Smile.HD, some of the other characters come in and try to defend their friends. The video gives you a sense of hope that maybe the deaths have been avenged. But no, if only it could be that way. Me and many other children who watched this video always wished that the other characters could, like, kill Pinkie Pie and get revenge and avenge their friends. But it never happened. No matter how many times you watched it, it didn't change. It's like watching Revenge of the Sith and feel like, oh, maybe Order 66 won't happen this time. No, it's gonna happen. It's inevitable. Throughout the video, the deaths get more and more brutal. The animation and choreography is genuinely really well done. The animation is fluid, the action is snappy, and it all pairs up to the music really well. It seems as though Pinkie Pie is about to be defeated. However, unfortunately, she uses an earth-shattering beam and just destroys the planet, basically. I mean, I think it's fair to say that it's an insane video. Personally, I found this one more traumatizing than Cupcakes as a little kid. It would stay in my mind, and it kind of altered the way that I viewed the character of Pinkie Pie whenever watching the show. It was hard to not associate this video with the actual canon show, on account of how good the animation was and just how much it would stick in your brain. If you look at the comments of any of these videos, you'll see so many comments from people who grew up with them, and it's kind of sad to see, because a lot of people share the same stories as I do. There's another one of Mr. Davy's animations. This one was by the name of Derpy Gets Pranked. Derpy being my favorite character. Derpy Gets Pranked had a very nice thumbnail and started off very innocent. Looked like a scene from the show, like everything else. The character was associated with muffins, so there's a muffin placed out on a plate by these 3 child characters. Derpy then flies down and, well, takes the bait. They cut a rope that's attached to an anvil that was hanging above, and I always found the way that her wings continued to flap to be much more disturbing than her just being killed, because she's still alive through the torment of it all, which, it's bad. It's nasty. It's still hard to watch to this day, if I'm being completely honest. This next one wasn't technically made by Bronies. It was actually a moment from the show that scared a lot of kids. There was an episode on the show by the name of Lesson 0, which featured the main character Twilight Sparkle basically going insane. The normally calm and good-natured character becomes a manic mess, and visually has this very, very creepy, enlarged smile, which was used in a lot of My Little Pony creepypasta content. You may be familiar with it even if you never watched My Little Pony, or even were in any sort of Brony subculture to begin with. For good reason, this freaked a lot of kids out. Definitely wasn't the worst thing in the world. There was much worse. But it still shows that My Little Pony, even as a show, still had some scary moments. The show wasn't necessarily for little kids. It was kind of, I'd say, like 7 to 12-year-old age range. So there were moments of violence and scary imagery younger children who were watching the show really did not like. Now, another example of kind of terrifying Brony stuff was a video by the name of Pony Sliding into Boxes. Kind of. So there was this video which showed ponies sliding into boxes with some cute music in the background. It was adorable, very heartwarming and cute video. It was basically just an animation on loop, but with different characters. However, someone took this animation, redid it, and then added one where a pony slides into a box of nails. This leaves the floor to start pooling with blood, and then the pony to comedically say, "Oh, shit." This video wasn't the worst thing in the world in terms of traumatizing Brony things, but the way that it snuck its way into such a cute and innocent series of videos was really what made it the most disturbing in my opinion. It went from just genuinely cute and calming stuff to then a pony sliding into a box of nails. I feel like it's pretty self-explanatory. As a little kid, I loved watching the ponies sliding into box videos, but I was always like on edge watching them because I wasn't sure if it was gonna slip into that animation, and many other people share that exact same sentiment and feeling. Now, there was another animation by the name of Little Miss Rarity, which was probably the most mature out of these so far. Now, this started off as a fanfiction on a Tumblr blog, and then was adapted into an animation series on the YouTube channel Little Miss J. The video starts off with the main character, Twilight Sparkle, using a scalpel to extract the other character, Rarity's horn, which accessed her memories. We then see what happened in the past. While working, she was scratched by her cat and then proceeded to throw it against a wall, killing it. Terrified by her actions, she attempts to bring the cat back to life via the means of this very creepy little doll. We then see her little sister tied up. The story's a bit hard to actually understand by watching the video, and honestly, I don't feel like reading My Little Pony fanfiction right now, so you're just gonna have to go with my interpretation. Rarity continues to inflict pain on other ponies, her friends, and stuff like that. She ends up burning a heart-shaped mark onto herself, and then starts hallucinating. She gets arrested, and then this, like, Resident Evil creature comes out of her stomach, and we see more disturbing imagery. The thing about this video, too, is that the designs of the ponies are, like, weirdly humanized and, like, seemingly kind of sexualized, too, which gives it a strange, kind of gross feeling. It's definitely not my thing. And I was fortunate enough not to watch this video as a little kid. I'd seen the thumbnail many times, but I never actually ended up watching it, and I'm glad that I didn't. Now, something that the Brony community is known for throughout the internet is, and I'm gonna say this without getting demonetized, the jar. So, how do I say this? There was once a man on 4chan who had 2 little Rainbow Dash dolls. He then proceeded to fill it with his seed and put the little pony inside of that jar filled with that substance. And then he put it on a radiator, and so it caramelized, turning the liquid brown, which was all being posted to 4chan to the delight and dismay of many. Bronies haven't really been able to escape this one guy's actions because, yeah, it's really gross. Like, it's really fucking disgusting. If you want to learn more about it, Wang's got a great video on the subject, and he eventually ended up actually interviewing the guy who did the thing. But yeah, so that is a thing. that happened within the Brony community and was memed about and talked about quite a lot, and especially more in current days. It's nasty, it happened, and unfortunately, some children at the time were aware of this. I, again, fortunate enough to not be. Thank God, but still. Now, the thing about My Little Pony and Brony culture is that it heavily kind of tied into furry culture. Now, most Bronies weren't furries, but a lot of furries were Bronies, if that makes sense. Just simply because, you know, anthropomorphic characters in a TV show, that's kind of what furries like, you know? So a lot of the stranger things that furries are into ended up having art of it being produced with My Little Pony characters and uploaded to YouTube and DeviantArt and all sorts of places. There's one video that I remember that would pop up a lot that was basically a video of what I believe was like a Flash game on DeviantArt or Fur Affinity, of Rainbow Dash being tied with a hose attached to a keg of apple cider, which was heavily featured in the show. And this is like a revenge sort of thing by the other character, Applejack. She's tied up a friend and is now force-feeding her apple cider. This video then shows Rainbow Dash being filled with said cider. The stomach inflates so much that it's like a circle and the limbs are just kind of popping out the side, and throughout the video she's like complaining about it, and it's really weird. It grossed me out as a little kid, I'm gonna be honest. And this also ended up leading a lot of children to develop sort of like inflation fetishes later in life. For those who aren't chronically online, there's a lot of really weird art of ponies being inflated. Really of anything being inflated, but ponies were a very popular subject matter at the time. And it was really, really easy to find everywhere, really. I don't know why, but it was like, if you were looking up My Little Pony stuff, you were gonna find this shit. The way that they had Rainbow Dash, like, uncomfortable through the whole process and, like, being upset about it really just kind of, like, made the whole thing worse. It would have been less disturbing without dialogue, but yeah, it was there. Not a fun thing to watch as a little kid. People like to deem this sort of thing the Elsagate before Elsagate. I don't personally see it that way. However, in a future video on the topic of Elsagate, I will cover this sort of thing alongside another channel by the name of Kphoria. That is a topic for another video in the future. Now, something that a lot of kids did, including myself, was looking up the characters on Google Images, either to just look at different art of them or to draw them. I was big into drawing little ponies as a kid, and again, my favorite was Derpy, so I'd often just look up literally just Derpy hooves on Google Images with safe search on, which, you know, the first like 50 or so pictures would be completely innocent, either screenshots from the show or just fan art of the character. Completely fine. However, once you started scrolling down a bit more, you'd be met with a lot of really, really nasty content. Whether it was more inflation stuff, weird nudity. There was this odd subsection of pony art where it was like the characters, but they had human-sized, like, breasts that would just hang down because they're on all fours, but they would still be like down there. It was really strange and just looked anatomically all over the place, but it was really nasty for me as a little kid. I had no interest in even looking at human boobs at the time, so, you know, I wasn't wanting to be looking at Derpy Hooves' weird pony human boobs, you know? Another big thing that scared a lot of kids was Rainbow Factory, a creepypasta and YouTube video that portrayed Rainbow Dash killing different ponies and using their blood to create the rainbows seen in the show. Now, for those who don't know, in the show there was a rainbow factory, which is where the rainbows came from. It was built in the clouds and it had this like cute, mysterious kind of aura to it. I personally really liked it whenever it showed up in the show as a little kid, but Bronies basically like creepypasta'd their way into this and made a lot of creepypastas and fanfictions around the Rainbow Factory, and that basically the rainbows that you see can only be made with the blood of dead ponies. The evil, depraved nature of the characters that play here was really disturbing for a lot of different kids. Just the concept of it was not fun to think about at all. Many older fans, mostly the edgier teenagers, were obsessed with the Rainbow Factory, and for decent reason too. Looking back on it, I can see the appeal of this dark and edgy nature to it, but too many children were exposed to it, leading them to just feel gross and bad after watching this sort of content. Another example is Pony.mov by Hot Diggity Demon. You may recognize this YouTuber by his news series by the name of Braindump, which is really well made and really funny. It's good stuff. But he was part of the Brony community back in the day, and created a series of videos that are now known as Pony.mov. These videos are made for the sake of being edgy and disturbing and gross and absolutely not anything like the show. The characters were all super mean-spirited, and it was violent, but it was pretty funny to a lot of people. It was hard to find a Pony.mov video that wasn't disturbing, but there was one big one that really scared a lot of kids, and this was Shed.mov. In this series, the often well-mannered and sweet Fluttershy character was an evil psycho murderer who sounded like Fat Albert. Long story short, this video features the ponies going into Fluttershy's shed and seeing the skeletons and bloody remains of a bunch of different animals. In the show, Fluttershy loved animals and cared for them, so seeing this was a wild juxtaposition. Hell, they showed Derpy Hoove's remains. She's turned into like a skinned toaster oven thing. Fluttershy then enters the room and takes a chainsaw to Raymundo's head. It's got a strong YouTube content rating, but it's not age restricted. And honestly, it's kind of sad to see the comments of people recounting how much this scared and disturbed them as little kids. But that really just was the nature of being a kid brony back in the early 2010s. It was really hard to avoid this sort of content. A lot of people would find it even when not looking for it. Another thing that you'd find a lot of the time too was gore art of these characters, or just general creepy things as well. And something that a lot of people unfortunately came across were the fluffy ponies. I want to say, like, do not research for this topic because it's really, really nasty stuff. For whatever reason. I've tried to understand it, but I just cannot. There is a large subsection of people who enjoy art of these very cute little fluffy pony characters being abused and treated in horrible ways. This sort of content was widespread and is still being made to this day, and is even appearing on TikTok for some people. Initially, people were really confused as to why this sort of thing existed, and why it was so awful and gratuitous. Some people thought it was a fetish thing, which for some people it is. Some thought that it was just being spread and shared because people wanted to be edgy and cool. That could definitely be the case for some. Regardless of what the intention was, the content is always just absolutely hideous. And it was just genuinely awful and deplorable artwork, especially of such cute and innocent characters. To anyone who did end up seeing this sort of thing as a kid, I am so sorry that you had to go through that. Like, I'm genuinely feeling it for you. Like, that is awful. If you see a video or pictures or comics starting off with these fluffy ponies, don't continue reading, don't continue watching, because you're probably gonna see something terrifying. This video might make it seem like the Brony community was awful and, like, deplorable, but it really wasn't. There were so many really sweet and nice individuals in the community, and the general atmosphere of it was a really supportive and kind one. A lot of bronies were on the autism spectrum, and the community ended up becoming really a safe space for those individuals, where they could interact with other people and have ease of communication with fans of the same media. It was really sweet. This was especially a thing at BronyCon, which, as it sounds, was a Brony convention. There were multiple different ones, but BronyCon was the big official one. This took place in Baltimore, Maryland. The first BronyCon meetup was in 2011, and continued to grow more and more popular every year, with eventually dying in 2019 after attendance numbers majorly dropped, and the My Little Pony show was ending, and the fandom just wasn't really a big thing anymore. Now, as you'd expect, attendance of BronyCon was mostly grown men, but there were a lot of children there too, and I was one of those children. I had begged and begged my mother to take me to BronyCon, and eventually, yeah, we ended up making the trip to Baltimore and going to BronyCon. For her, it was a very bizarre and surreal experience, but for me and my little brother, we were having the time of our lives. The whole time, my mom secretly wished that we would grow out of being bronies, while me and my brother chanted that we'd be bronies for life. Luckily, yeah, her wishes were granted. We are no longer in the brony community. Not that there's anything wrong with being a brony, but, you know. But regardless, BronyCon initially was actually really smart about how they handled their NSFW content. Now, obviously, there are a lot of people in the Brony community who are heavily attracted to the My Little Pony characters. They will look at content that is NSFW of these characters, and they will, you know...
watch porn relating to ponies?
What? What?
It's called clopping.
What? What are you... What? Are you
there were a lot of cloppers in this Brony community. And so there was a lot of art that appealed to that. And this was on partial display at BronyCon. See, they had rules where you couldn't show full-on NSFW content during the daytime, because that's when the children would be out. However, when it turned dark and most of the children would leave, the vendors could then reveal their NSFW content. But this didn't stop people from having like borderline stuff up. I remember there was a lot of art of the characters as humans in very small bikinis, or like body pillows of the different characters that, well, some of them were like child characters on these body pillows, which even as a little kid I was not happy about. I found it very gross and disturbing. And there was just a lot of weird stuff. There were those titty mouse pads, but you know, it was like ponies, plushies with holes in areas that implied bad things. And you could just sometimes even tell by the vendors. Some vibes were just a bit off. But yeah, some of the stuff at BronyCon was kind of rough for a kid to see. Now, unfortunately, a lot of people who grew up being My Little Pony fans feel very deeply affected by the content they consumed as a kid. Many people feel that watching this incredibly disturbing and violent content as a small child affected them neurologically in ways that they really wish that they weren't affected. They feel desensitized to gore, violence, and some even feel like they were led to be hypersexual after viewing so much of this content as children. This was an incredibly irresponsible thing in the Brony community to do, in my personal opinion. Now, obviously the content wasn't made for children, but it is a children's show. I understand there was an adult audience, but the show is still fundamentally made for kids. They should have known that children would be exposed to that sort of content, because they were, and it affected them in a lot of different ways. I don't feel as though I was personally affected in those ways by this Brony content. It scared me, but I was a mass consumer of horror content as a small child on the internet, which I think has led me to have a lot of love for horror as a genre and as a storytelling means. I'm also very interested in gothic subcultures, and I don't necessarily think this is a bad thing, but still, I mean, I wouldn't be making these videos now if I didn't watch all that shit as a kid, so it obviously had some sort of effect on me. It really is saddening to the extent that these children were exposed to things that no kid should be seeing, especially by the means of their favorite cartoon. Something that should be innocent and should be kind of sacred in a way was desecrated and maimed and made disturbing, all for either shock value or depraved fetishistic reasoning. Within the Brony community in its early days, there was a lot of homophobia because bronies were often being called gay by the media, and a lot of these were insecure straight dudes. Or at least dudes who thought they were straight. So, being gay was looked at as a bad thing in the Brony community by some, especially considering that so many of them were edgy 4chan users. Now, in the later days of this community, this sentiment definitely wore off. But if you watch the infamous Brony documentary, you'll see a lot of this homophobia on display. I personally look back on my Brony days with a lot of fun. I had a great time, and I loved the show, I loved BronyCon, I loved all the fan art, and I loved the fandom. But it's undeniable that there were some incredibly messed up things that should never have appeared. And this is only really the tip of the iceberg. And honestly, I'd be open to making another one of these videos. If there's more of these kind of disturbing Brony things that you'd like me to talk about, please comment below. And I might actually make a follow-up video covering more of this content. And I just want to say to everyone who was affected by this content that I'm deeply sorry. And honestly, I wish things could be different. It's at the point now where many of the people who grew up on this content are young adults, and so can look back clearly, where at the time we didn't really realize what we were seeing and what sort of effect it could have on us. We were just little kids. But now looking back, there's a disturbing sense of realism when you see what you were exposed to, the type of content and its depravity, the individuals at play, and the realization that the Brony community was a much darker one than it appeared to be. I want you to share your stories of the Brony community, if you grew up in it, because honestly a lot of this is what I grew up with. It's really my perspective and my viewpoint, and I'd like to hear other people's, and I hope this video helped in some sort of way, whether it was reliving some nostalgic memories or kind of being able to feel that all again and kind of process it more that you're older, or just was entertaining. I don't know, at the end of the day, I hope it was one of those. It's funny because like I don't have all my Brony stuff anymore. I've got this derpy figure. I kept my derpy stuff, really. That's most of what I kept. I gave all my pony stuff basically to a friend of mine, and you see there, all of that stuff lives safely in her room. So my Brony stuff has a home. It still lives on.
So much stuff has fallen over. Like this.
Well, yeah, most of it is still there.
And Lucas's
Where the
photos of Furry
creepypasta?
stuff.
There we go.
Yeah, she's right there.
Cupcakes.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And this one too.
Oh yeah, I customized that as a little kid. Amazing paint job.
It's great.
Yeah, it's really good. Making this video has really been an interesting experience because it's brought me back in so many ways, and it was both really fun and also kind of really hard to make at the same time, if that makes any sense. Like, brought me back to my Brony childhood, but also reintroduced me to all this really nasty shit that happened there and that disturbed me as a kid. So, regardless, I'm glad that I made it. And I want to know if there's anything else that scared you guys. I want to hear input on this video because it's not really something that I've done before. I mean, I guess it kind of fits into that Gen Z childhood trauma genre, but to me this feels more like its own thing. If you'd like to see more videos like it, please let me know because this took a lot of work to make. Here's some fan art, and this here is Captain Orion as a pony, which is it's good. It's really good. I'd also like to let you guys know that if you look down below, if you just like look down, all my store should be linked. So if you want to get some cool Raymundo merch, you can. Because it's good stuff, and I would highly recommend it. So, if you want to be like these cool people who wear my merch, get yourself something good. And also, if you want to be featured, you will be featured right there, where everyone else is, in a future video. So, go ahead and do it. So don't forget, love and tolerate the shit out of people. I've been Raymundo2112. You've been a great audience, and I will see you all in the next one. So goodbye, until then.